It's Wednesday, May 26, 2021. I'm at the world famous Horseshoe Curve at the Horseshoe Curve Museum. This is a video about the Horseshoe Curve.
As the 8th engineering wonder of the world. And also, I think, from my standpoint as a track supervisor and an engineer who was required to maintain that curve, with the 8th engineering wonder to maintain also.
The Horseshoe Curve was built in 1854 by 450 Irishmen using only hand drills, black powder picks, and shovels. Its construction opened up the Allegheny Mountains to the transportation industry. It soon became the major link between East and West. Heavy traffic and harsh weather conditions made the everyday use and maintenance of the Horseshoe Curve treacherous and demanding. The railroaders who worked the curve were part of the tradition of dedication, loyalty, and hard work that made America's railroads great.
The basic maintenance of the railroad was performed by section gangs who had assigned territories. These foremen were responsible for the complete maintenance of their territory, full responsibility.
We went to the Horseshoe Curve right down in there and spread ballast around the curve on number 1 track, and they filled the rail, cleared up the top of the rail.
Well, then you'd have a pile of shale there, and you couldn't just leave that shale there, because when you went to level it off, you had to carry different ways, so you'd neutralize everything would look perfect. Then they had a board, they put a board down, and dragged the ballast down and tapped it down.
And we had to tap ties by hand and pound them stones under there, you know, with a nice big pickup. Dig a hole, then you pound stones under it.
Riders.
Yeah. Then jack it out, then you jack it up, and then you had to tap stones under there. The joints were down low, granny place. And the summertime, you would raise track. You'd go along jacks on each side, then you had to raise tracks, pull out ties, you put ties in. What they call the razor track, raise it up, then you had to tap the ties.
And then in some areas, like around the Woodson tunnels, they talked about that, and the Horseshoe Curve, they even went so far as to have flower beds, where there were gangs who were called flower gangs that did nothing but clean up around the station to make the railroad a beautiful place.
There's tables up there, and we painted those and cut the grass, all hand mowers and sickles on the bank, and grubbed that bank. The old briars come up, the blackberries and the stuff. We had to clean them all up. The scenery of the Horseshoe Curve was controlled. They had, from the early spring till fall, they had lilacs, and they had mountain laurel, and they had all kinds of flowers. You know, flowers and trees blowing all the time. So it was really scenery that was real nice.
One of the things that we were doing is primarily for safety. Those tracks had to be safe. At all times, keeping the tracks open, that the trains would pass in a safe and orderly manner was of great importance to us.
They knew where the bad spots were, and lots of times these track walkers, what they call a track walker at that time, nowadays they have a little car that run around you, but they used to walk that mountain every day of their life. And they checked every joint, every bolt in that track. And if they found one, somehow or other they got word that if you were coming down that track to stop you before you hit that bad section of track.
I had to stop trains from running broken rails at what they call the head and web, the top of the rail coming off. I had to stop trains where they got the rail changed and all. You had to keep on looking for those things.
Every place there would be a joint, the wheels would hit it and would hammer, because there was a joint there, the two rails coming together. And when it's too low, then the truck will keep it up and it'll jump the track, and then they'll have a wreck.
The problems were greatly accentuated with the cold weather in relation to track structure parts, which were made out of steel and iron. During the cold weather, our broken rail situation increased dramatically due to the brittleness and hardness of the rail.
We would have one or two assistants at those towers just to take and check the switches and keep them swept out. They were on duty around the clock. That is, they just weren't there for part-time work, but they were busy.
I put 40 hours in there. Home, went to work in the morning, went home, eat my supper, and went back to work, cause there was 11 o'clock the next night. Kind of snow, wind blowing and everything. You plug the switches up, they couldn't throw them, they couldn't cross the train from one track to the other.
They'd send these trains from Philadelphia, it'd be about 25 degrees, and again, they'd get up in the mountain, it'd be 0 or so. They'd have 150, 75 cars. Your train would freeze up, your line would freeze up, and they'd have to come put alcohol in the lines to get the ice out of them, get your air out.
The coal freezes up. In the days of our steam engines, the coal would take and freeze up in the hopper cars that they had trouble getting it down to take and service our steam locomotives with. And it's just trying for man and beast.
We figured that anyone who could master that mountain could master any place on the railroad, any place on the system. And as I always said, I would never feared the mountain that much, but I always respected it.
Well, going up wasn't so bad. Coming down, where the challenge was. When you had steam engines, you had to make sure that you wasn't going to run out of air, because there's been trains went off the mountain because of low air.
When you worked the mountain, take a train down, every 2 trains were different, so you didn't know what to expect.
This actually, it didn't come from the books. You knew what was in the books, but the books couldn't tell you how your train was going to handle at all. That was your own experience, what you knew about the tonnage of your train and the speed the train was supposed to be coming down.
You had to have your train under control on that slide going into that curve. If your train would have started to accelerate on you, had to take and get the brake on and bring it under control, because a tonnage train of 13,000 ton on that slide would accelerate from 15 to 35 mile an hour in maybe 10 car lengths or so.
Whenever we got over half the train through the tunnel, we started picking up speed. And so before we hit Benny, I say we was doing at least 65 or 70 miles an
Benny's
hour.
just east of the tunnels of Gallitzin, Pennsylvania.
So whenever
Just east of the summit of the Alleghenies.
From what I can remember, I didn't lose conscious all the way through it. My coach went straight up in the air like that. The dining car went straight up in the air. Then it broke coupling with it, come straight up again. Then we slid down, turned over once, and then slid the rest of the way down, 150 foot down.
Working on the railroad was dangerous and demanding. To the men who built and worked the Horseshoe Curve, it was more than just making a living. It was a way of life. For all of the hardships and heartbreaks, railroading had its rewards.
Anybody connected with the railroad will tell you that there is this word romance. There's kind of a bond between you and the track, or if you happen to be an engineer, between you and the locomotive you're driving.
Steam engine is a live thing. I mean, it seems like it breathes, it hums, it does all this and that, and it's up to you to keep it that conditions.
It really looked nice. That in them days, they really had the railroad looking nice. Now I think it's a mess.
If you love the railroad like I did, you grew up on the railroad, when you see a train pass, it would be a thrill. You see a train on the other side of the hill, it would be a thrill. And it just was a good feeling all the time to go to work in the morning. It was one of those jobs where, at that time, although we worked hard, it was just nice to go to work because of the beauty of the railroad and railroading.
And that's the end of the video about the Horseshoe Curve at the Horseshoe Curve Museum at the world famous Horseshoe Curve, just a few miles west of Altoona, Pennsylvania. It's the afternoon of Wednesday, May 26, 2021. Just about closing time at 10 minutes to 5 p.m.